Hey, and welcome to another tutorial. Now, I just want to do something a little bit different in terms of showing stylized shaders. There's a ton of tutorials online and YouTube, anywhere else that walks through very basic permutations of creating a stylized shader. With this one, I just want to go through some cool things you can do and maybe explain the concepts further. And hopefully you can use some of the components in your own shaders, maybe part of it, all of it, maybe a single parameter. Yeah. So I've downloaded a model here, and you can see the artist's names up here, and this is the model here. This will just be a basis of my demonstration today. Okay, so I've loaded up this model. I've created a shader, but there's no information, there's no material output. I'll walk you through a very, very basic toon shader. So we're going to add a diffuse shader here, and this is just what it looks like. There's nothing here because it needs a light source, and that's something important that I'll iterate later on, where I'm just going to add a sun here, and let's just add one. So this is what it looks like. It's lit, and it's taking this out. The green nodes dictate that this is a shader. A Blender, I think in 2.8, added something called shader to RGB. Now what this does is it takes the shader and converts it into color. So we add this here. Since this shader here is white, it's just outputting it as white. But we can change the shader color here and it does the same thing. But now we have access to manipulating this color into other things. For example, I can convert, I'm just going to switch this back to the default value here. I can convert this into a mask and use it to create very interesting effects. Just for an example, I'm going to make this into red, and I'm going to create a color ramp, which is a black to white gradient, feed that into the factor and put that back here. And now you can see it's kind of like taken the luminosity of this and made it grayscale. That's pretty cool. I think that's like a very powerful feature to be able to do this. It's simple in its form. So the real fun begins now, where we manipulate this color ramp, as you can see here, where we can start getting a stylized shape by crunching these values together. Now there are different algorithms here that manipulate the gradient, and it's just down to what kind of aesthetic you want as an artist. There is no wrong or right way of doing this. It just depends what's pleasant to you as an artist. So for me, I personally like it when there's like a bit of gradation here. So my aesthetics lean towards something with like a little bit of blurring here. But just to show you, you can use something called constant, which gives it just a harsh black and white look, which could be helpful if that is something in your style. Okay, so that's how you create a very basic toon shader. This is just a basic mask for it. And let's just bring this back up to white, because the light here reacts to what color it is, so this is way better just using white, I find. Okay, so what happens now if we try and tint this red? Well, it's not really reacting, or the colors aren't changing. But if we just do the color here, you can see it's reacting. Now that's a problem that a lot of stylized shaders have. There are some really amazing creative solutions, and it's something that takes a fair bit of logic. I have some techniques. The look isn't perfect, but it gives you something to work with, or some like temporary solution until someone else comes along and creates a solution closer to what you might find. But as a basic thing here, we have this shader here. Now I just want to do a fun quick setup that I use in production work, which makes it easier to change things on the fly. Because with this here, with this color ramp, you know, we can manipulate this. We can change the color right off the bat like this and create really, really cool looking stylized shaders like this. Get some rim lines, we can change this to ease, get some really, really cool looks. However, we are just limited now to whatever the color ramp is here, and if you wanted to change something and see faster iterations, you'll have to come in here and you'd be like, okay, I want the red actually to be like this color, and it kind of throws you off balance, at least for me, the production flow. You can also add in something called the hue saturation. You can like manipulate this over here, the hue, so you're just kind of like shifting the color spectrum around. That's pretty cool too. What I like to do is I like to create something called a mix RGB and plug this into the factor, and I'm just gonna create a new color ramp just so we can have a fresh start here. And I like to plug this into the factor. Now we can change these colors here, and as you can see, it's mixing between the two based on this ramp. You can also like change the actual mask. I'm going to start calling this a mask, but like how the light's hitting it to make it more stylized. We can have something like this. You can see that. This is an easier way to make it even easier, maybe a bit more redundant. We can add something called RGB, which we can plug in here, and now we can just change it from up here, which leaves us to kind of tidying up our node tree. Shift P to add a frame, call this colors. We can go into this RGB here, label this shadow, come here, label this light. We can change the color of this to something like this, and we can just move this up here. We can then drag this window down, go up, zoom in, and we can pin this. And then what pinning does is if we change our object to something else, we can pin this. So if we click on something else here, you can see it disappears, but our colors are still here because we've pinned essentially our shader here, so we can always like move the lighting around and like see what it looks like in different situations. That's really cool. Alright, so that's that in terms of manipulating. Oh, I'm going to keep that up here. Like I said, for my own aesthetics, I like a little bit of feathering between the edges here, so I can go into linear. You can see that nice feathering. I'll crank this up slightly, just so I can get a little bit of feathering there. That's really cool. So let's drag this down here, and let's just kind of like the blue here. Okay. Super, super cool. Now, we can start manipulating this a bit further. Since this is a color, we can start mixing it with like textures to really influence how the light is reacting. I kind of like the airbrushy, spattered look on these edges here. I did have another tutorial that goes through some stylized shader, but I'll just show you here too. So I'm going to add a node called a noise texture. I'm going to add mix RGB. I'm going to plug this down here just to show you what it looks like. So it looks like this. Alright. I'm going to plug a noise shader here so you can see what the noise is doing. I'm just going to crank this up. I'm going to add a color ramp. And I'm going to really see what the shaders or the noise texture is doing here. Well, this kind of needs mapping here, so I'm using Node Wrangler, and the hotkey is Control T. I'm going to switch this to Object, so it kind of scales correctly to whatever object it's on. And now I can play around with this. Alright, so let's see what this looks like when it's a little bit like that. Okay. So now I'm going to add this into our wrap here, which should look a little more stylized now, as you can see. And you can change like the influence like that. Now the noise texture here is a little too large, so too large. So we can like really crank this up, and now you can see we have more of that really cool spattered look. And now we're getting a really cool gradation here. The cool thing too is we can add different kind of textures in here. So once we have this workflow or key map set up, we can start iterating. Let's just clean this up a little bit here. So we have our mix here, and then we're gonna bring this way. We can call this Shift P, and let's do line texture or transition, or you can call it whatever you want. Let's change that there. Okay, so we have noise texture. If we go Shift A, go to texture, I definitely recommend experimentation. There's a lot of stuff here. So let's say we want to use checker textures. No idea what that would look like. Oh, there's also ways to route and split and cut your node. So instead of like coming down here and adding this, you can hold Shift and drag right click, creates a reroute, and it does basically the same thing. It just kind of keeps this a little bit neater. Okay, so I'm just going to plug this color in here and see what happens. That's really cool. I didn't expect that. Add this up, drag this down, and hopefully this is giving you ideas now of like how to start creating your own cool shaders. All right, that's pretty cool. Now we can also combine these two together just to give you more ideas of what you can end up doing. We can add something called a search mix RGB. Combine these two factors. Control Shift click to see what it looks like. Ah, yes, that is because I need to actually, we're feeding our noise texture into here to strengthen it. And so we need to bring this like this, add this here, add our checker texture here, and now if we lower it, yes, you can see it's adding that. And now if we add this here to our color, oh, let's take a look. There we go. So now we've combined two masks, where it's the checkered and the noise look. I think this looks super cool. Just like breaks it up a bit more. So we're going to keep this for now. But hopefully that'll show you how to start building your own stylized shaders and how to manipulate that line. Just to iterate stuff here. What's happening is we have textures here that are mapped to the object. We are cranking the values of the noise. We're feeding it into the mix because we want to combine these two. And you can control the intensity between the two and mix it like this. And we're feeding that and mixing it with the shader to RGB. This is the light information that's hitting it. We are then using this mask, as you can see, this is what it looks like, and feeding it into this color ramp, which makes it black and white. After that, we're feeding that into a factor, which is basically masking it. We then have two different colors up here, and we're tinting it based on those colors. We're mixing it in between. That's really cool. So let's drag that here. I actually had a quick idea on how to change the select. Instead of checkers, what happens if we use a wave texture? And what a wave texture is, it's just lines like this. I think we get something really stylized. So we can do this here and drag this up. And let's take a look. That's super cool. As you can see here, it's almost getting like that comic booky style. We could change the scale of this, but of course this is acting a little odd. Now I think that's because it's using the object. We might need to use something else. So if we duplicate this, and maybe, I think generate might be better. Whoa, definitely weirder. That's kind of neat. Not what I was expecting. We can probably rotate this. Texture 45. Oh, 45. That's really cool. I like this look. Alright, I'm going to keep this for the duration of it now. You can see we have like nice texture from the noise and the straight lines. And now if we rotate this, you can see we get some really, really cool looks to it. It's kind of odd acting around here, but at the same time, what happens if we do object? We might have that weird banding. Yeah, interesting. Let's see, scale, rotation. There's some really interesting moments though that are happening like larger and smaller. Here we go. Let's keep it at that. I think maybe that's more visible. Okay. That's super cool. Okay, so we have this. What else can we add? So you now know how to like manipulate the way the light's hitting. You can mix those things up, and you can tint them. I also explained how usually you want to keep your masks unaffected by color, but the one problem with this technique is that if you wanted like a tertiary or a third color in between, you'd need to use a color ramp. So let's just quickly do that here, and we can like click here, click on this color, drag it down, pop it in, click, drag it down, pop it in. We can shift do this, click this here, and we can just connect this to the surface. So it should be kind of similar, yes. But now we have an option to add multiple colors. So if I come in here, I can do stuff like this. And now we're creating really, really cool looking shaders this way. We come in here and even make this a bit brighter. That's looking really fascinating. We can also add something like brighter up here for the hot colors. You can see, dragging it down, and we can actually tint these to any color you want. So this is a special case scenario. If you really have something in mind where you need all the gradations, it would be best to use this. You can also have a cut look. If you use cut out, you can see what might happen here. So it keeps that stylization without the gradation. Again, this is up to this aesthetics of you as a personal artist in your journey. For me, I like the look of ease because I like that gradation look. It almost looks like a turn of the century, like 1920s poster. It's kind of cool. Okay, so those are two techniques of using it. It's just flat colors. If you keep it simple, you know how to manipulate the lines here. What else can we do? Well, we can add in fake rim lights just to really make the object stand out. How do we do that? Well, there's something called layer weight. Just to keep this simple again, I'm just going to go back to this color here and drag this like that. Okay, so layer weight. Layer weight. What does this look like that? Well, you can see it's kind of like the Fresnel. It's kind of like creating rim lights around the contours. If we do facing, it's basically facing towards the camera. Now, wouldn't it be great to manipulate how much these rim lights come in? You can. We just need to add something called color ramps. It's a very powerful tool. So we can do this, and like now we have this kind of effect going on. And we can feed this into a mask similarly how we did this. And we can add in rim light colors up here. So we have this, but our color is here, so we need to mix RGB, and then we will put this into the factor, which is the mask. Which one is which? Okay, so we need to make this black, keep this white, but we can create a new color up here for us to control. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm just going to rename this rim light. And we can also color this to something else if it makes it easier. So let's just do something like that. And now, oh, I thought you could actually drag that down for a second. That'd be cool if you could. Now drag this into here, and now I have an option to change the color on the fly when I need to. And similarly, we can always go in and add the texture here. We just have to do the whole thing here, but I won't do it for this demonstration. Okay, so now how do we add these two together? Well, we need to add this as an emission. That doesn't work like that, and we need to add another emission. Plug these two in, and then there's something called a mix node. We can also add something called an add shader, which is an additive thing. Put those two like this, and now you can see it's actually picking up the look here. We can change this color, so just to show you a bit more how the rim lights are. We could change the strength of this. That looks super cool. Look at that. Change the strength. Okay, so now you know how to add like rim lights and like how to manipulate them. You can play with the blend here as well. And if you don't want to come down here, we can add something called a value, and we can drag this value and connect it here. So now you can kind of like keep all your controls up here. It keeps it nice and easy for you to change things. That's the one thing about like node organization. If you start getting like spaghetti nodes, at least if you have the main components up here that are easily accessible, you can play around with this, especially when testing stuff. Later on, you can create groups and like have the access through there, so it's only through one area. But for now, this is a good way to work if you're prototyping stuff. At least in my workflow here is specific to me. Okay, now I'll show you one last thing. It's something that's still being worked on. There's been other tutorials on how it can be achieved. There's some really cool tricks you can. And by all means, this technique isn't perfect, but it might set you on the right path, and maybe hopefully you'll find the answer and share it amongst people. So the big thing is, I'm just gonna actually turn this rim light off, and you can delete this, and actually, let's add that sun back in. So you can see what happens when I change the color of the sun. It's not really tinting this object here. What if we wanted the green to be affected or tinting the object underneath? Well, we know that with the shaded RGB, it has this information, but the reason why it's not showing is because we're creating this RGB value, or this color, into black and white. So our problem lies within this step here. We will need to create a whole new network branching out, a shaded network branching out, and then reconnecting back in to bring that color information in. Now, it may sound complicated. I'll try and make this as painless as possible. So the plan is, we're going to grab the color from the shader RGB, going to separate the RGB values, and combine them back again, and then add them at the very end of our node structure. So let's try that out. There's something called RGB. I'm going to look for separate RGB. We're going to now look for RGB, combine RGB. We're going to plug this in here, and we're going to plug this like this. What does this look like? Exactly the same. But if we take two channels out, it should show the red. We can play with the green here, and then the blue. All right. So now we can. Whoop! I'm getting funky here. So now at the end of our node tree, which is here, the add shader, we can add another add shader. And this is going to be our emission. Plug that here. Plug that here. And now our light source is being tinted. Oh, sorry, our base is being tinted here, as you can see. The colors are changing. But it's also taking into account that this is white, because if we change this red, it'll tint everything. What if we don't want that? What if we just want like the actual values, like the darkness here? Well, we could go in here, in between the separate RGB and combine RGB. We can cut these out a bit more. We can also, instead of using add RGB, there's something called mix RGB, which we then copy a mask over. So we have this, and we have this. We'll bring this in here. And now, see, it's a bit pink here, but if we still want that deep blue, we'll have to put a mask on. And now we can use this, because it's the same values as this. So if we bring this all the way here to color, we get our blues peaking a bit more, but our shadows are a little bit tinted by this object here. So you can see that. I know it's a lot of like weird things to think about, but this is actually really cool because our background is black right now. Oh, gray. There's still some light source coming in. So if I were to lower this down, now you can see what's happening here. We're still getting some information from the diffuse here. This is what it's looking like, and our shader in the end has some of that nice blue. Okay. Now I was talking about like manipulating the light. Well, we can add in color ramps. Let's say in here, and we can change these, as you can see, to really accentuate or stylize what it should look like. So let's say if I like this, let's just duplicate this, 2, 3. And now we're starting to stylize our light. The reason why it's crunching like that is because we're limiting the range. As you can see here, if we added constant, we can almost get like a polarizing effect of the light source. I kind of like this look here. So we're gonna add, let's say, well, you know what, I might just create something here. So I'm gonna create like a stepped polar look here, and we want this to be 0.5, so it's like 3 tones almost. You can see that here, split. And then I'm going to duplicate this 3 times and plug these in here, plug this here, and finally plug this here. That's a really cool look. It might be a little too strong, but hopefully it'll give you a basis of like trying new things out, because that looks super cool when you play around like this. You can see that it's kind of tinting the oranges here a little too much, too red, because of this boy here. So there's definitely room for experimentation still, but it's cool that you actually manipulate the lighting information. You can see here, I'm going to use ease again. So you can see that it's affecting this way. And let's see what we can do here. It's mainly red. Like that. I can play with this for a while too, but just wanted to give you like a basis of something to play around with. That's hot. Look at that. Very nice. And now we can move this around. And what happens if we add this back up? You can see that's our rim light. We're adding an add to it. Where is it? Here. And we are gonna change this to blue. And we're using our mix shader here. We probably don't need to add these two together. We could, if you wanted the rim lights to go on top and rather than be maxed out, we'll have to change the order of things. And that's something to think about too. Is like, what are the order of things you want? So we have add. We can pop this guy in here, and then we could go and add the shader back in with the emission here, and that should affect everything. A little too much, my bad. Whoa, 0.5. There we go. And now we can change the color of this. And now we're getting something really stylized and different. Yeah. Like I love 3D and seeing like different things you can do. So hopefully these tools that I'm teaching or demonstrating can be useful. It can get a little complicated if you're starting out, but if you keep at it, do little tests and little studies, and seek, or just experiment, see what happens if you plug random things in, and at least try to keep things semi-organized, so it's not too much of a deterrent when you're trying to change something. It'll definitely be helpful for you. Like I can, like, for example, like, oh, I don't like these colors, I can like quickly change these. Shadow. Oh yeah, because the shadow's being affected by this, so we could change this again. So this is being plugged in. The reason why I know this too is like this is the darkest value here, but if I were to replug that in and then do this, I can get my shadows back in like that. Because now the darkest valley isn't black. I can try maybe bring some shadows back in. No. Okay. But now I have the shadows back here, and you can control how dark these shadows are, like that. Just show you what's going on. Just, I'm wrapping up here. Like, the black, it won't take the mask, but since I'm making it gray here, now it's feeding some of this color in. Okay. Well, that was a bit of a journey there. Hopefully, this video might be a bit too long, but hopefully there's some nuggets of information that helps you guys out. All right. Thank you.